Thank you for joining our NHD Academy Campout session entitled, Are Accessory Dwelling Units a Solution to the Housing Shortage? My name is Jeff Bukowski, and I'm the Director of Sales for First American NHD and JCP LGS Disclosures. I'll be hosting this session. There will be some time for Q&A after the presentation, so please hold your questions until the end. And now, I would like to introduce you to our speaker, Carrie Shores. Carrie is a licensed architect and lead accredited professional who received her master's degree in architecture from UC Berkeley and is principal at both Inspired ADUs and Larson Shores Architecture and Interiors. Carrie's fierce commitment to ADUs began when she, herself, faced serious spinal problems. The wisdom gained from her 10-year battle for wellness and personal independence drove her dedication to find creative ways to work with existing and potential space on our clients' properties. Here to discuss common zoning codes, site eligibility, costs, financial options, and construction methods, and to equip you with a general understanding of ADUs, please join me in welcoming Carrie Shores.
Great, thank you so much. We'll just do our smooth but awkward transition into PowerPoint. Okay, so as introduced, we're going to talk about accessory dwelling units today. You know, spoiler alert, are they the solution to housing? I think they're a solution. They can provide a lot of this middle missing housing that we have talked about so much, but I'm going to go through kind of why I love them, what I think they're doing of value. So today we're going to just introduce you basically to what ADUs are, the ever-changing laws in California around ADUs, finances, looking at the numbers of ADUs and how they can impact California, and then just finishing up with some design ideas. So starting with what they are. So looking at a standard neighborhood, we've got a neighborhood that has infrastructure, it has schools, police, fire departments, it's got sewer systems, roads. So one of the things I love about ADUs is that they're a very sustainable way for us to grow our cities. So the different types are detached ADUs, probably what we most think about when we think about the backyard cottage. And I will just stop and say, it was someone on the state of California who named them ADUs, accessory dwelling units. Historically, we've known them as granny flats, backyard cottages, in-law cottages, but in some sort of wisdom from the top, we now have ADUs as our nomenclature. Attached ADU is also a often used option, the garage conversion. And then we have the attic or basement, or what we can call an internal ADU, which can be a junior ADU. I'm going to go through a few examples of each of these so that we can start to, really dial in the value. So there's pros and cons with each type. This is a detached ADU, which gives us the greatest opportunity to begin to sculpt the property as a whole and look at how the ADU and the house can work together. It's also an opportunity to build from scratch. A lot of our houses in California have a couple steps in, a couple steps between levels because of a design decision at the time, which means that housing isn't going to be as inclusionary. I have a particular passion for making ADUs as accessible housing. I spent a lot of time fighting my house because it didn't support me physically when I was having health issues. And so I really want to design for seniors and just add more housing stock to California that can be used by anybody. So you can see this cottage has 0 threshold entries that helps them borrow the landscape from outside and also just make more of this indoor-outdoor transition. Detached ADUs typically are the least disruptive to the main house because they are not going to alter the existing structure. They're not going to shut down the utilities or other elements. They're probably the simplest way to put a cottage in the backyard from a disruption point of view. That being said, they are often pretty expensive option of adding an ADU because you're building a whole house in a small footprint, and we'll dial that in more. ADUs typically can be have the utilities pulled off the main structure and then extended to the backyard. There are some different jurisdictions requiring separate meters and separate utilities, and that's kind of an ongoing evolving issue with legislation and the battle over the utility companies. But with this ADU, you can start to see, we can really start to sculpt how to maximize the yard. A lot of people are worried about how the ADU is going to change their property. They're losing their yard. But truth is, most of us don't want to maintain a big giant yard. And if we think about how the cottage could be located to create this shared space, communal space, and how the different buildings interact, that can be a real opportunity. Aesthetically, the majority of municipalities in California are not requiring the ADU to match the front house. So you have some opportunities to do something a little more expressive. ADUs in California are by right, meaning they have to be ministerially approved, kind of basically from a planning perspective over the counter. Cities are allowed to establish what they call objective design standards, and those standards can be enforced, but they can't be something that goes to design review or neighborhood notification. So the detached gives you a little bit more freedom for what you can do style-wise. Now, attached ADUs are a pretty interesting idea. Attached ADUs let you capture and use the same height limit as the main structure. Right now, in general, everyone has the right to build a 16-foot tall ADU in California. If you go to attached, you can go, if the house height limit is 25 or 35, that ADU can go to that same height limit. This really can help you free up the backyard and not change a lot of things about the main house and the main kind of what you're used to with how you engage in the yard. You will, however, most likely have to upgrade the structural integrity of the big house if the house hasn't been retrofitted, if the foundation hasn't been updated. And I did just feel that earthquake a few minutes ago, so pleased to say my house is sitting still, but you will most likely trigger a structural upgrade when you do an attached ADU. One of the opportunities, though, is that we can take underutilized space in the main house and use it for the ADU. So maybe you've got a 5-bedroom house, the kids are out of the house, you're only using a couple of the bedrooms, you want to keep the house whole for resale, but you can kind of borrow some of that space in the existing house and flip it to the ADU to get more square footage. Garage conversions. Garage conversions can be really a neat way to do an ADU. This is a standard lot in San Francisco where the garage had been set back on that rear property line. You can see on the right of this property and on the left side over here, the building was built right to the property line. That means this is an existing non-conforming structure. It's not something we could build today, but it's something we can convert. New ADU laws a few years ago said that if you were going to convert an existing garage to an ADU, you do not need to replace the parking or add any new parking. So this was a huge win for us with garage conversions. Keep in mind, the property line walls do have to be retrofitted typically to be fire rated. They're not usually fire rated, so you usually have to go around to your neighbor's property, work from their side for at least a week or so to get those walls improved, but you can keep them where they are. This is the inside of that ADU. This is just a standard 2-car garage. So on one side, we've got a big living room, doors out to the side yard, and then a kitchen tucked into the nook. Now, most of the time, the value of these garage structures is purely the footprint they occupy in the yard and the general envelope that they take up. Because you can keep that envelope, you don't have to give up any more of your yard space. But these garages are typically not designed to handle live loads of someone living in the building. Usually they're virtually kind of lifted up or taken down and rebuilt in kind, but today's standards. So if it's a more recent garage, you could probably keep the shell and have some savings there. And those garage conversions can be a little bit lower in price, but often there's not a waterproof membrane under the slab. There's not plumbing or sewer. So we usually have to do some intervening to get the building to comply. And then people always wonder about, where all their storage will go. So there is displacing that, and I'll talk a little bit more about the effect on appraisals later. And then attic or basement conversions. Now these can be typically the most straightforward from a cost perspective. If you have the height in your attic or your basement, and that can be between 7 feet if the city has adopted the California Residential Code versus the California Building Code, which has adopted 7'6". So if you've got the height limit, you can convert that space. Often you'll have to take the wall, the ceiling and any shared walls and add a layer of fire rating, but that's just some drywall. It's not too complicated or costly. The units do have to have separate entrances, and they have to have separate utilities. So a separate hot water heater, separate heating and cooling, but it can be a really easy way to convert space. You do have to think about, from both a basement or an attic conversion, how you're going to get up there. So are you going to do a new external stair? Can you do it internally? And then how does that affect the main structure? Now, we think often of these like basements or attic conversions in retrofits and older houses, but as you're developing new properties, we can get these new, what we're calling junior ADUs in a unit. So this is a house we did in San Francisco, but the ground floor is kind of a mother-in-law unit or ADU. You can't see it here, but there's a kitchenette here on the left, and there's a bathroom behind me. Everybody in California has a right to convert 500 square feet of their existing home and make that what we call a junior ADU. A junior ADU has to have its own entry and its own kitchen, but can share a bathroom. But it's a great way to get another rentable unit that you either keep and use for family or potentially rent out. Again, if you are doing these retrofits and it's not new construction, lifting up or adding more space can require structural upgrades and the fire separation between the two floors, just from understanding from a cost planning perspective. But I think the inspiring thing for me, and we did our first ADU, I think in 2000, gosh, I've lost track of time, in 2008 or 9. It's housing that can evolve. And it's interesting as we go into new housing RENA numbers and what's required of kind of how we track these ADUs and what they are. Because it may be that a young couple buys this front house, the ADU in the back is rented out to an au pair to help with childcare. As that family gets older and has more kids, maybe their aging parents need to move into the ADU to help out with the grandkids. And then as they become empty nesters and begin to age, then maybe they have a young couple move in there. And then it's time for them to move in there because it's an age in place home that's less maintenance than the big house. They don't want to deal with that anymore. And then they can rent it out to a young couple, or they're all wishing they have adult kids and their kids move into the front house. So it becomes this really great life cycle where the housing stock really just evolves with your family, whether you have some unexpected incident come up for an immediate family, you've got the space. And it's a lot of really, it's been fun for us to experience our client stories of how they're using it and how it's adding value to the whole property. So California laws. Okay, so the earliest ADU that I remember legislation passing is this Assembly Bill 1866. So basically what happened is the state recognized we're going to have a housing crisis. If we look at the growth patterns of the state and acknowledge how many houses we have and the trends, we're going to run out of opportunities. So the really interesting thing that came up in there is that they require local governments with a second unit ordinance to ministerially consider second unit applications. So at this point in time, the intent with the law was great. We should think about these units. They had not named them ADUs yet. But what happened is they gave local jurisdictions the right to add additional requirements, and they did. They added parking requirements, lot coverage, they did size limits, they had excessive setbacks, and there was really much more of a NIMBY attitude from local planning and building departments. They thought that neighbors were going to get up in arms about these. They were going to really be a real issue. They didn't see the value in it. And basically because of this, all these overlays really restricted how many people could do it. I think from 2007-8, when we got involved in ADUs, we would maybe do 1 or 2 a year. Often we'd illegally put a kitchen in afterwards because we couldn't get it passed with it. And we have just seen a night and day attitude about it. So there's been several laws in between that early one in 2018, but 2018 is when things really opened up the ADU world. It's when they created ministerial approval, which means basically no municipality can deny you the right. It's an over-the-counter is an oversimplification, but basically it limits the local municipality's authority. And this was really huge. So this really opened up a lot. And then the codes went a lot farther in 2020. So they established what we call the state exempt 800 square feet ADU that's 4 feet from the rear and side property lines and 16 feet tall. So basically everyone in California has the right to add this state exempt ADU. Lot coverage can't come into play, minimum open space, floor area ratio, all of that is removed, and it's a guaranteed right by the state. They also added that garages can be converted and parking doesn't need to be replaced. They introduced the notion of the junior ADU, a 500 square foot ADU on a inside the footprint of the main house. So now everyone has the right to an 800 square foot ADU, which could be attached or detached for a garage conversion. And then they can also convert part of their main house so it can become basically a triplex on every single family property. And then they also introduced ADUs on multifamily properties. So basically, if you have a multifamily property and it has 4 units, you can at least add 1 more. So you can take 25% of and that's the unused parts of the building. So if you had carports, garages, community rooms that aren't used anymore, you can take 25% of the number of units and convert some of those underutilized spaces into ADUs. So if you had a 16-unit building, potentially if there's space or unused garages, they could convert those spaces and make 4 units in a 16-unit building. And then there's an or. So for multifamily, you can convert that underutilized space, or you can add 2 detached ADUs in the backyard. No fire sprinklers was added if it's not in the main house. And so that was really a great savings for people. I put an asterisk there because there's a couple caveats. If you are very far from a fire hydrant, or if it's more than 150 feet from the curb of the property to the rear of the ADU, then local fire can ask for fire sprinklers. Another big thing in here that I see that I left out is the parking. If you are within a half a mile of any transit, so that's any bus stop, BART, Caltrans, anything, and it's as you walk, not as the crow flies, but if you're within a half a mile of transit, then no parking is required at all, which is really, really great. Let me show you just a couple visuals of how this code came to be. So looking at a standard property, We've got our front setback here, the existing house. We can convert 500 square feet of this main house into a junior ADU. It does need that separate entrance. There is part of the code where you can actually bump out 150 square feet more, but only for ingress and egress to get in and out. And then we've got our 800 square foot ADU. I'm just showing that as detached in the back. You can see our setbacks here have been reduced to 4 feet on the rear and the side. Also changes with parking is that parking is allowed in the front setback now, and you can have tandem parking. And then thinking about our existing non-conforming structures like garages that may be sitting right on the property line. This one is a little bit more complicated, so I would invite you to talk to a local designer about this before you proceed. In most areas, you can expand this non-conforming structure as long as you adhere to the new setback. So you have to step in that 4 feet and step in that 4 feet, and then you can add on. Some municipalities are restricting how much you can add on to an existing structure, but that is a little bit up for debate. So then we are just on the eve, just in September, Governor Newsom signed several more housing laws, 2 specifically focused on ADUs. AB 2221 cleans up the 60-day approval process, meaning in the last round of codes, it said that all ADU permits must be approved in 60 days. There was apparently not enough language in that law to enforce that, and so we haven't been able to. It also removes the front setback, cannot limit the ADU development. So if you do not have enough room in your backyard, this new law says that the front setbacks cannot limit you putting it in the front. So what I'm afraid of, and this is editorial comment, but I'm afraid that this front setback law is going to go through the same thing as that 60-day approval, where it's really hard to see how there's enough strength in the language to enforce that or what that means, but we'll see how people go. And as a general sentiment, planners and building departments are all really coming around to the ideas of ADUs, which is great. And then the second bill is State Bill 897. So this is adding new height limits. So if you're in a transit area, and they've defined this a little bit differently than the one I just described in the last stop, it has to be more of a major transit area. The height can go to 18 feet for a flat roof and 20 feet for the pitch. Now, keep in mind, there's a lot of cities like Redwood City, San Jose, Berkeley, that are already allowing 2-story ADUs and ADUs up above garages. So there's a lot already happening there, but the state is kind of pushing some of the municipalities that aren't being as adventurous to let you go a little higher if you're in a transit zone. They've also gotten stronger about the language. They can't deny an ADU permit if there are non-conforming zoning or building issues on the property. So if they come on site and there's something wrong with the main structure or an illegal something on the property, they can't keep the ADU development from moving forward based on that. These are really cleanup laws mostly, and we're going to also need these cleaned up. What keeps happening in our code cycles is that the legislatures are worried that an ADU law is not going to get passed for some reason. So they keep issuing multiple laws that have pretty serious overlap. And then we're left with these, kind of 60 days until they go into law where they're going to need to be refined and cleaned up quite a bit. So hopefully we'll see how these all shake out, because in AB 2221, there's a bunch about height, but it says, if 897 gets passed. So there's a lot of overlap. There's cleanup we're going to need to do, but we're going to keep seeing these evolving and moving forward. So it's good to just stay on top of them, understand which ones just came through. But let's dial in on the finances. So I love this picture because sometimes people call and say, I've heard garage conversions are a super affordable way to do it, and how much is it going to cost to convert my garage? My colleague who's down in San Diego shared this image with me for a different talk we did. I mean, this just represents, if this is the state of your structure, these are not inexpensive efforts, right? They are, you're building a whole house in a small footprint. You've got to worry about all the big expensive pieces. So, it's just important to understand that and where we are in California. So these numbers come from Cole Peterson, who is a real leader in ADUs out of the Portland, Oregon area. And I think they're pretty low. But I do think that the relationship of what he's showing of the Los Angeles costs of $147,000 for an ADU versus the Bay Area, I think we do see that discrepancy for the cost in our two areas. I think one of the struggles is that often building professionals put a lower value on their permit to keep the appraisal lower in the end, but that's also skewing the data we're getting about what ADUs cost to build, because we are certainly not seeing that 236 for an average cost. So I am based in Northern California. We're working mostly in the Berkeley, Oakland, Walnut Creek, Orinda, and then San Jose, Palo Alto zones. This is what we are seeing, and in all disclosure, we are not the most affordable ADU company, but I'd rather give you a real perspective of what I can attest to from my business. So garage conversions, assuming they don't look like that last picture I showed you, but have some integrity and value, can be more like 200 to 275,000. For a 400 square foot detached ADU, we're looking at $600 to $800 a square foot. And you'll notice that when we go up to 800 square feet, our price per square foot is going down. It's the first 300 or 400 square feet of an ADU that's the most expensive. That's where we're packing all the infrastructure, all the expensive parts, and that's what's adding up to a higher cost per square foot. So we certainly are encouraging clients to try to get towards that 800 square feet. Now you are allowed to go over 800 square feet if your jurisdiction allows, and then you can start to get that cost per square foot to be a better value. Why it's hard to be transparent about cost of ADUs. This is a worksheet we give with our clients, so we build it in Google Docs. So what we've tried to do is take everything that could possibly come up in your project. We give you a general estimate of what those costs could be, and then we build the actual expense for your project after we determine whether it's needed or not. But at times we're going to need to submit a copy of the deed or the title. We usually require a boundary survey, a topographical survey if it's really steep or hillside. Soils reports are needed in a lot of areas because of fault lines, and that can really add a chunk of money. Fire sprinklers, if you're in if your main house has fire sprinklers, you need them. If you're going to build the ADU further than 150 feet from the sidewalk, you may need them. That's the fire department gets a say on that. All new construction as of January 1 needs solar panels. And my number is off on this one, so ignore that one. For an ADU, we're typically looking like at about a $7,500 system for the ADU. With solar, you can put the ADU either on the main house or on the cottage. You can choose. And if you have a system on your main house, then often you don't need to add a second system, but you might need to add a few panels. Permit fees vary quite a bit. This is what I would say would be standard for a Berkeley or Oakland property. You can trigger civil engineering. You will trigger structural engineering. And then you have to get into your architecture, interiors, water line upgrades. Sewer lateral will have to be upgraded if it's not been upgraded when it sold last. And then I've just put appliances in this when we're looking at getting to the soft cost number. So often for our clients, we're seeing this is soft cost and infrastructure. Because the infrastructure can vary so much, we kind of clump these different pieces together. Contractors, if we're looking at a low cost of $350 a square feet versus a high cost of 650. The building itself is going to be 311, and then that gives us a total project cost of 365, 361. So there's a lot of variables that go into figuring out how to do this. I wanted to give you a few scenarios of actual projects and kind of report in on how they're being used. This is an ADU on the top that we did in San Carlos. You can see the floor plan. It's got a bedroom, a writing desk, a closet, a bathroom. We always do everything age in place. So it's a curbless shower, a kitchen, laundry, and then a living room space. It's on a very steep hill. It's got no parking. And the cost for that build was $250,000. Our client rents it to traveling nurses, and they pay $3,200 a month for the unit. If we look at the one on the bottom, this one was done in Oakland. It's got a great outdoor space. We turned this L shape away from the main house so that the ADU has this full private court in the backyard with big doors that all open to their own private space. This is a 2-bedroom with 1 bathroom, a bigger kitchen with a peninsula, again, curbless shower, open living dining area. They built this one for $340,000. They really wanted a long-term tenant, and so they rented out for $3,700 a month. But the plan with these clients was that the homeowner, it's a really great, beautiful little front house with lots of stairs, little tiny rooms. But the owner suffered a brain injury. And while he's doing fine navigating the house now, he won't recover from this injury, and it will just continue to get worse. So instead of waiting until he got worse, they had the foresight to build the ADU now. It's totally age and place friendly, totally wheelchair friendly. And then their goal would be to move back here when they need to and rent the main house. They estimate for $7,500 a month. And then sometimes the investment isn't about, rental. So finally, after doing this for a number of years, and the majority of our clients have been multi-generational living situations where families pool resources. My husband and I just moved my mom and her partner into this ADU in our yard. So we built the max we could, the 800 square foot detached state exempt. It's 2-bedroom, 1.5 bath. It has a kitchen. This is a similar design we use a lot, kitchen and peninsula. And then we do an open wraparound deck to help connect everything and make the spaces feel bigger. Totally fully accessible. There's no steps in, no thresholds. The bathrooms are all curbless. And the real value is that, we needed to think of a place for my mom. We look at some of these numbers, and even I get sticker shock when we talk about the price of these different ADUs. But the truth is, if you're going to buy into a senior community, you're buying in at $300,000. You don't necessarily get that money back for family. So you have to think about your legacy and what you're leaving behind. And then those properties have a monthly fee. So the ones around our house were $7,000 to $8,000 a month per person. And so their money was just not going to last that long. One of the neat things with these ADUs is that, like my mom sold her house, she paid for a chunk of the ADU. That becomes an asset to my husband and I because it's on our property. We don't have to pay any inheritance tax on that money. So if she had given us the money, we built something ourselves, we would have paid inheritance tax on that. And then we also have a peace of mind that they're in a cottage that they can stay in as long as possible. We can check in on them easily. And of course, it is not without, other issues, but they're able to leave age in place with no rent. And that's a great value. So everybody often wants to know about appraisals and how do we appraise these ADUs? It's pretty tricky because they have not been around that long. As I mentioned before, Cole Peterson is out of Portland. He has a great website, and he has a show called the ADU Hour. And he did a great interview with an appraiser up there who goes through a lot more of the details of how these are appraised. And he took areas of Portland where they start building a lot longer before we did. And again, their housing stock, the cost of their housing is much, much different than our area. But from his numbers, he looked at garage conversions. So converting the garage to an ADU added about 20% of value to the property, but then you got dinged for losing the garage. So there was a 10% loss for the lack of the garage. So you had an overall 10% gain. The basement or attic conversion added about 16% to the added value. And then when you explored detached ADUs, they really went from anywhere between 22% up to 71%. And not surprising, but if the property that had an ADU sold and then was up for sale again, having that historical, those data from what that did on the previous sale really helped to up the value. And I think that's where he got to the 71%. I can certainly provide that information to anybody that wants it. It's a really interesting talk, and it's just too much to summarize as part of a longer pitch. But the Turner Center has been doing a lot of work on ADUs. They just released their new survey, and it's no surprise, but it's the fact that people can't afford, very few people can afford to build these ADUs, and that's what's keeping people from doing more of it. So their survey showed that the median statewide construction cost for an ADU was $150 or $250 a square foot, but there's a wide variation depending on the region. In our region, in the Silicon Valley, San Francisco Bay Area, we're way, way more than that. But there are also the fact that 62% of homeowners depended at least partially on the cash savings or money from a friend or relative to finance their ADU. So this is really limiting the pool of people that can get a product to help them do the construction of an ADU. Turner Center issued this a few years ago in 2017, but it just is a nice summary of the fact that it's the high income, high equity people that are getting, the best access to how to finance. So the majority of people are using a HELOC. Refinancing right now isn't always as great, as you all know, because the rates are in flux. And if someone had a really great rate from years ago, then they may be hesitant to move forward on that. High income individuals, but with low equity in their home, maybe they've just bought it, can access the renovation loan. And then it's really the low income, low home equity people that are in the most difficult position. And not surprising again, but I think hoping to see some new products come to market that would really help more people build ADUs, and maybe you all can put your heads together and work on that. There is a great grant right now from Cal HFA. They have a $40,000 grant that they are issuing to families for the site prep, architectural designs, the engineering, the permit cost. All of that can be covered by this $40,000 grant. There is an AMI to qualify, but it's pretty high. I think in Alameda County, it's $282,000. In San Mateo County, it's $300,000. So it's not targeting the lowest part of our community, which does need more support. But the great thing is this was launched, and you all might have heard about it a couple months ago, and the whole thing was a real mess. They were forcing people to refinance when they had great loans on their house and they couldn't get access to the loan. It has been cleaned up and is really working super, super well now, and is really a great thing to help kind of take the edge off of those higher price tags I was sharing. Okay, ADUs by the numbers, and I need to go a little faster, but Los Angeles is leading, definitely the hub and the most movement we're seeing in the ADU market. The Bay Area is in second position with 19% of, and this is ADUs permitted from 2018 to 2019. Keep in mind, we had that new legislation in 2020, which opened more doors for more people. With San Diego and the Central Coast are coming up in the third and fourth place. But really fun, this is the ADU permitted in California. So looking back at 2013 and then to 2019. So this is just permitted and not executed, but I think we're going to see the 2020 and 2021 numbers just, you know, off the chart. It's estimated that the California ADU market potential is 1.5 million. And they're estimating that there's only 230,000 ADUs existing now. That probably does not cover illegal units that need to be converted. Amnesty is a whole nother talk we could do and get into that. Most cities are looking to put in place amnesty programs to legalize non-conforming ADUs. I think a lot of that got delayed just with everyone pivoting around COVID and learning how to work online. But we should see a lot more of that amnesty programs coming down from local municipalities in the next year, I would say. So if you're running into clients with illegal ADUs, there's hope. I think we'll start to see that shift and break loose pretty soon. But just looking at California home values, what they did increase 44% from 2010 to 2018, but family income only went up 10%. So the ADU is really a tool where someone's got that equity and they could begin to leverage that and look at what it can do for them financially by adding that ADU. And then we're in the middle of the RENA numbers. So this is where the state is looking at our population forecasts. So they've got it here growing up in 2030 to over 8.5 million. And this is the data they're using to set how many new houses we have to add in this next housing cycle. So this cycle is just starting and it's an 8-year cycle. They look, I think that's pretty interesting at the San Francisco Bay Area and turquoise. They compare our housing market indicators to comparable cities, so larger municipal areas. And then they look at to the overall US charts. And you guys can dive into this in more detail. I'm happy to share some slides. But they're looking at our population growth adjustments, and then they're getting down to this projected households and looking at how much housing is going to be assigned. So I've pulled up Santa Clara County. You can see that in San Jose, we go over here to the right, they need to add 62,200 housing units in the next 8 years. Now for San Jose, maybe that's not a huge deal because they're not afraid of multifamily. We've got a lot of areas where density makes a big difference. But if you go to Saratoga, which is a pretty small city, which feels more rural, they have to add 1,700 in the next 8 years. Most of our smaller towns who really need to add a lot of housing are looking to the ADU as the hero, as how can we add all this housing, potentially keep it affordable and not change the characters of our towns. And then I just wanted to show you a couple real quick. This was a 1-car garage, and you can see this is the old roof line of the 1-car garage, and then we expanded it once we got out of that non-conforming area. This is for some grandparents that come down and help with their grandson during the week, and then they go back to their house up in Sacramento. Got a tiny little sleeping loft. And then this one is for some parents who live back in New York, but they like to come to 3 to 6 months to stay with their grandkids. And there's just a lot of opportunity, and I've run out of time today to show you of just ways to kind of capture space outside and engage indoor, outdoor, keep things more accessible and reachable, and make housing that can really be inclusionary for people and give us more opportunities for who can live here, who can afford it. And I think I'm over my time, so I want to leave some space for questions. So I will stop there. It's a topic I could talk about a long time, and it's hard to condense down. Hopefully I've given you guys an overview here, and we can.
Yes, thank you, Carrie, so much. A lot of good information there. very cool to see some of those pictures as well and kind of how the space has been used. So, but I would like to open it up now for some questions. If any of you have questions out there, please just use the raise hand feature and we'll unmute you, but you also have to unmute yourself if you have any questions for Carrie. Okay, Camelia, I see you have a question.
Hello. I have a question regarding garage conversions. Do garage conversions trigger property tax reassessment on a structure?
It does. It's a great question. It's an existing structure, but garages typically don't count as habitable square footage. And because we are converting that non-habitable to habitable, it will get reassessed. The main house doesn't ever get reassessed. It's only the ADU footprint that gets reassessed.
Great question. Okay, it looks like we have another question. Elizabeth.
Hi there. So I have a listing where they have a garage that was converted, but what they had done was pulled a permit for recreational use. How difficult is that to then convert that to an ADU? And it was permitted for recreational use like several years back.
Okay. What jurisdiction are you in?
San Joaquin County.
Okay. You know, it's varying quite a bit. I would say my pulse right now is that what happens is it's the building department, fire departments who have to get comfortable with what level of life safety they're going to make a, well, actually, sorry, your question is different. It was done as an accessory, recreation, and now they want to make it an ADU. Actually, sorry, I was thinking illegal structure. It should be super easy to convert that. It should be a very quick permit. You just need to make sure you have the cooking area and the bathroom and a sleeping area, and you should be able to be the ADU. It should be a very straightforward conversion. Sorry, I started to go down that rabbit hole of illegal structures and when we should deal with those.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, thank you very much, Elizabeth. Okay, it looks like Donna, you have a question as well?
Yes, I do. First, thank you so much. Your information is much appreciated. As a matter of fact, this entire thing is much appreciated. So thank you. My quick question is, you mentioned Cole Peterson, and how do we obtain a copy of his talk?
Yeah, he has a great website, and I can put that, I can get that information to Brooke and Jeff and Josh, and they can get that to you. I can put together a couple of resources that I can share. Kind of HCD has a handbook, and they're HCD at the state level. I didn't talk about much, but they're the organization that's enforcing ADUs. So if you have a local municipality that's not, and HCD is who can kind of crack down and issue a statement on what they need to do. So Donna, I'll put together a few different resources and share that with the organizers, and they can get that out to everybody.
I appreciate that. I'm in Sacramento, California, so I'm very much interested in it. Thank you.
So Sacramento is doing a neat thing. We actually our firm worked with them. They're going to give away free ADU plans, completely free. So they have 3 new ADU plans that they're going to give to people for free to help encourage ADU development.
Well, thank you very much.
Yeah.
That's it.
And thank you, Donna, for that. It looks like Pam, you have a question for Carrie?
Yes, I do. Hi, Carrie. I heard you mention, we're building an ADU here too on our property. And I heard you mention about solar, that you can put it on the front house, that you don't necessarily have to put it on the cottage.
That's right. So you're going to trigger, any new construction is going to trigger the solar requirement, but it's, you know, we have to design and build these new ADUs to set stringent energy codes compared to how our big houses are built. So often you're going to get a more robust system because you have a bigger roof on the main house. And so it's often beneficial to put it on the big house if your roof is newer and you don't trigger a whole new roof piece, because you're going to get a more robust system that'll cover a lot more of your energy use. And often, you know, I like to think about sometimes, I mean, I don't really personally mind the look of solar panels, but if you have a 2-story front house and you're doing a smaller cottage in the back, when you look down at the cottage, you're going to be looking at solar panels. So
Yeah.
sometimes too, from an aesthetic point of view, it's nice to put it on the big house.
Awesome. And so, and it covers both houses, and it would help the cottage as well as the front house in energy costs, is what you're
That's
saying?
right. That's right.
Awesome.
Unless you've decided to do a separate meter. If you're doing separate electrical meters, which most municipalities are not requiring, then you would want to do it on, well, I think you can do it, you can still do it either way. But typically we recommend to clients that they just pull the electric off the main house and not do a separate meter. And there's some aftermarket software that you can use to track the energy use of the different meters without
Oh.
having to go through the PG&E process of doing a whole separate.
I'll have
meter.
to check now to see what we did. I don't know, but I appreciate that. I'm going to look into that because they were trying to tell us we have to do solar on, you know, they're recommending on the front house, but also on the cottage. And I'm like, oh my gosh, but it'd be so great
Yeah.
if only to do it on the one. So I'm going to look into that. Great info. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. Elizabeth.
Sorry, one other question.
Yep.
As
Yep.
far as on the grants, do they have to refinance it on the main home as well? Or if it's paid off, I mean, can they still apply for that grant?
Yeah, they can still apply for the grant. They just reworked the whole thing. So hppcares.org is a new nonprofit that came in to help distribute the grant. I think they've been overwhelmed with applications, but keep checking. They'll have good information. So basically, Elizabeth, if it's like you can use savings or 401k as, you know, you have to put funding that in escrow to show that you've used the funds properly, and you have to build the ADU. But we have several clients who have gotten the grant, and the grant is paying our office directly for architectural services. And so it's great. They used to make it, you had to refinance everything. And so people didn't, it wasn't worth it when the rates are so much higher now, but it's not required anymore. So that's why I'm really recommending people go through that hppcares.org because it's a nonprofit. And then if you're, it doesn't have to, because there weren't, one of the flaws with the program when it came out is there were only certain financial institutions that could get access to that money. And then it was kind of questioning a lot of things, but so they've cleaned it up. So look into it. It should be great. They don't have to refinance. They just need to have, to show they have the funds, or they already pulled out funds from a HELOC, and that they can put those into an escrow account until the grant is issued to them.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you very much. Okay, we've got another question from Greg.
Hello. Hi, Carrie. Hi, Jeff. I am checking because I saw some dialogue on a YouTube or something, and it showed experts who say they are, were saying that the ADU concept is great. Although when it comes time to sell, does Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac have restrictions on another dwelling being on the property?
No, and this is really interesting because we got into this a while ago, Greg, and actually like early on when people were trying to decide, do they do multiple meters? You know, when we had clients who wanted to look at multiple meters, then we got into this conversation of, well, is it still a single family, or is it going to limit the products that can, you know, be involved when it goes to be sold? So to exactly your point, but the state's been pretty clear, and it can't be sold separately. It's not a separate unit. It will often get a separate address, but it is just a single family unit with an accessory dwelling unit. And an accessory dwelling unit is not a dwelling unit of its own right. So it is still just single family property. So any financial package can take care of it.
Got it. Thank you so much.
Okay. We are nearing the end of our time here. Maybe one last question, Elizabeth. I see your hand again. Did you have one more question?
I'm so sorry. So
That's okay.
as far as classifying that property that I have with this converted garage to recreational right now, in our MLS, you know, there's a section where we can classify it as an ADU, but because it's not permitted as an ADU, then I shouldn't classify it as an ADU, correct?
Yeah, I would not classify it as an ADU, but I think you could certainly put something in your package of, fairly simple steps to make a legal ADU unit. I mean, it should be a very simple process with the state law. So I'm not sure at this moment in my day that I could tell you what that good language is, but sometimes we'll kind of help agents even do like an assessment and show like what they could fit in a backyard. And so you could, maybe explain the steps needed to convert it to an ADU, and it should be a pretty simple step.
Thank you.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you again, Carrie. A lot of great information. Thanks for answering all those questions.
Sure.
And if you want to check out more with Carrie and Inspired ADUs, it's inspiredadus.com. And if you have any other questions or you wanted any more information as well, you can always reach out to our sales team via email. It's nhd.sales@firstam.com.